Greetings from Jersey Mike's Arena, where Rutgers just suffered a heavy defeat to Indiana. I took the stats down, so I don't have them in front of me. An 82-59 loss to Indiana, where Indiana hit a lot of threes, and Rutgers depended way too much on Tariq Francis, which is starting to become a theme for this team. But before I get into the game, first of all, thank you to those in the chat already before this. And shout out to Linda Conroy, a regular listener, came over and said hello at the rack. Very much appreciate you watching. Very much appreciate you coming over and saying hello. So shout out to you before we get going. And before I dive in and answer your guys' questions, just give me a thumbs up in the chat or say something that you guys can hear me fine. Everything looks good. And we're all good here. Oh, Jesus, I just ruined the light. The display was bad enough. I ruined it more. Anyway, how am I sounding? Good, guys? Is anybody in the chat? Are we live? Anyway, I will soldier on. You guys let me know if there are audio issues, and I will fix them after. But, all right, thank you, Sweet Lou. Appreciate it. This was a game where Rutgers really was out of it by the midpoint of the first half. They clawed back a bit in the second half, or I should say towards the back half of the first half, but they entered the break down 15. They were down by as much as 17 in the first half. They trailed by double digits for the last 22 minutes. They got down by as much as the final score 23, and they were never really able to climb back because Indiana shot 42.9% on threes. That's what they do. They take a ton of threes. They take I had the stat before the game. They take 51.2% of their shots from three. That is 12th nationally. And tonight they had 40% of them, and that buried Rutgers, which is a team that isn't able to keep up with in a shootout. That's kind of just been it's been proven here. And I think part of the issue is that they depend too much on Tariq Francis. Tariq Francis scored points on 10 of 23 shots. Went 7 of 8 from the free throw line, had 3 assists. Between his 28 points and his 3 assists, which led to 8 points, he scored 36 points, which is more than half of Rutgers' output. He took 40% of their shots. That's been essentially the trend of the season. Tariq takes, when he's on the floor, 32.4% of Rutgers' shots. That's the 30th highest ratio nationally. And look, it's good for him. Like, he's producing as well as you can expect. He is performing right about the level he was at NJIT. He has almost the same exact role as he had at NJIT as ball-dominant guard, who they put the ball in his hand and ask him to score. So he's holding up his end of the bargain, but I think it is an omen of the lack of scoring options on this team. I mean, is there anybody else on this team that you can give the ball and hope to get you a bucket? Maybe Darren Buchanan. He didn't have a particularly good night tonight. Finished with 7 points on 7 shots and 1 rebound. So just limited options offensively. No one on this team really could drive and get to the rim and finish. Lino Mark can get to the rim, can't quite finish. He got blocked when he went there early in the first half. JaMychal Davis can kind of get to the rim, can't finish. He's too small and can't score against Big Ten rim defenders. And they have no center they can dump the ball into. Emmanuel Boye, drops lob passes from Tariq Francis, and aside from a loose ball he gets in dunks off an offensive rebound, they don't trust him. That's clear. I would love to have the stat of how often they've thrown the ball inside the paint to Emmanuel Boye in the past 10 games. It's got to be total 4. I mean, they just don't trust him. They don't trust Bryce Dortch because, let's face it, he's not much of an offensive player. And then the centers behind him, Javonte Ware was questionable going into this game, still hasn't played since the Seton Hall game on December 13th. And by fall, was out for the 3rd straight game. Steve Pikiell said he had surgery on his hand, so he will be out for the long term. I would be surprised if he plays at all this season. I mean, I guess there's a chance on the back end, but if he comes back in March, what's the point? So I will kind of mentally – he's not ruled out for the season officially. I would mentally put him at probably out for the year. And when you have a center you can't put inside, you don't have guys who can drive to the rim and score, defenses don't have to respect that, and they can't shoot threes. They can't create open threes. They have a decent 3-point shooting percentage. Actually, they don't. They shoot 31.9%, which is 261st nationally. So they can't hit threes. They can't create open threes. So then you're left with essentially mid-range jumpers that teams are happy to give you, and Tariq Francis iso ball, which half the time are 2-point mid-rangers that teams give you. So a bleak picture for this offense, which now after today's game ranks 165th nationally, which again feels better than it's been. They have the 335th effective field goal percentage. They have the 339th 2-point shooting percentage, 261st in 3-point percentage. The only reason they're at decent efficiency is that they are decent offensive rebounding and they are decent against the free throw line and they don't turn the ball. But if you drop it down to just Big Ten, and we're halfway through the Big Ten schedule, they are 15th out of 18 teams offensively, 17th out of 18 teams defensively, efficiency-wise. And we'll go to that side of the ball now because that's where Steve Pikiell was really furious. Not surprising considering Steve Pikiell is a defensive guy, but some of the stats he was very upset about. I mean, this stat shocked me when he mentioned it in the postgame. 5 fouls. Rutgers had 5 fouls. And it wasn't because refs were swallowing their whistles. It's because they weren't aggressive enough. And, the effort thing is always kind of a intangible, but when you commit 5 fouls, that shows a complete lack of aggression, a complete lack of trying to get through screens that teams set. Indiana ran the same play where they took a 3 in the corner off of a screen some 10 times, and it always led to an open shot. Rutgers was nowhere near aggressive enough defensively, and that was kind of the thing that helped me go over the top against Northwestern and Oregon is that I don't know if they played particularly well, but they played really hard, and they did not play hard. Steve Pikiell said they had one of their worst practices under him yesterday. He has harped on that a little bit recently, but I mean, this is as blatant of it as I've seen him call out his team for its practice efforts and call out his team for effort in general. And this is not a coach that often is as blunt as he was today. So clearly upset, and he was very upset during the game, very demonstrative, both in the good and the bad. And I don't know what that means necessarily, but I do think clearly part of that was the effort issue. And again, defensively, they weren't great. They gave up 50% shooting from the field, 42.9% on threes. Indiana did whatever it wanted offensively. They got 11 offensive rebounds, but only got 8 second chance points. So that wasn't a huge issue. But they only forced, they only forced 5 Indiana turnovers. So you forced 5 turnovers, you commit 5 fouls, way too passive. And the crowd never really got into it. Part of that is because this was a unique crowd. Today was the one-piece giveaway night. Felt like half the crowd understood what that meant because some of them were here exclusively for that. And the more regular fans, the older fans, I'm not sure they quite understand the giveaway. I mean, the cards they were giving away were being sold for $500, $600, $700 a pop on eBay immediately after people got them. People were selling them for that in the stands. They were flying. There were scalpers in the concourse with wads of cash trying to buy cards for $300 that they're probably going to flip for $600 to $700. People were selling their T-shirts for $20, and I do feel bad for fans who weren't aware of the value of them. I feel bad for any of you guys if you guys got ripped off on that, but and I hope whoever is here in the chat that did get your card and did not open it know that you can sell it for a fortune online. So be aware, and if you don't know how to do that, ask somebody who knows, and they can get you money. They're worth a lot. I would love to hear, you guys in the chat about your experiences with the scalpers. I didn't get to see it much up close, but I did hear the anecdotes, including from Linda, who I mentioned before, who came over to say hello, and she says in the chat that she headed to the press box to get away from the anime One Piece fiasco. The halftime show was a little disappointing. I thought it would actually have people from the live action show. Silly of me to expect that. It was really just the Rutgers band playing the theme songs from the show, but One Piece, for people who don't know, is like one of the longest running animes of all time. It has 1,100 episodes in Japan. It is huge. I wouldn't advise you guys to start watching it now because it takes way too much commitment to catch up, but it's obviously very popular. And then after the halftime show, that's where the rub comes in doing these promotions. Half of the crowd left because they were here exclusively for the halftime show and for the cards before the game, obviously. So when you have 4,000 people at best here to start the second half, the team's down double digits. They're getting beat on both sides of the ball. There was really no energy here. And I think Steve Pikiell was almost apologetic about that. He was thankful for us to stay throughout the whole game and make sure to shake everybody's hand. He does that after every game to us and to the crowd as well. But I just felt a little more emphasis tonight compared to previous nights on just I don't know if he felt bad about the way the team played, but I think he was clearly aware that it wasn't a good look. Let's go through the comments now. J-Max says, I called it. Indiana shoots a ton of threes, and if they go in, Rutgers is toast. I said before this game on our Discord, which you guys should join, check it out, the link. If you don't have it, shoot me an email, shoot me a Twitter DM, or check the Twitter at Rutgers Rant. The link is in the bio. But I said Indiana will either win by 25 because they'll hit a ton of threes, or Rutgers will win by 2 because Indiana will shoot something like 12% on threes. And unfortunately for Rutgers, the former happened. Indiana went nuts. Rutgers couldn't guard Tucker DeVree. They couldn't guard Lamar Wilkerson, who's shooting an absurd 40% on threes on enormous volume this year. A stud at Sam Houston State, stud at Indiana. Rutgers really couldn't compete. Maron says, Dr. Josh Fink, Rutgers has Michigan State next. What's the line going to be? Rutgers 20-plus point dog. Interesting that they were 20-point dogs at Iowa, and that was clearly wrong. And they were 5.5 to 7.5 point dogs tonight, and that was also clearly wrong. So the bookmakers haven't really gotten a good feel of Rutgers. Although, to be fair, Rutgers has been a bit of a strange team over this season in certain spots. Dr. Josh Fink says to start Lino Mark, Chris Newley, Kane Powers, Tariq Francis, and Javonte Ware to let them develop. If you let them develop, you're letting the team lose. I mean, Javonte Ware isn't playing for a reason. It's not like Rutgers has a stud center out on the court. He's playing because he's not ready. And I mean, as bad as the centers have been so far, I would reckon he would be worse because he's not playing. I don't know. The development isn't really a thing to do here because you don't know if these guys are coming back next year. And I think evaluation is a good thing to do here, but I just don't know how much development you're going to get, in the next couple months. I wouldn't do anything for development. I would do things here for evaluation and put players in spots that you can envision them being in next year and see how close they come to that. So you have a frame of reference to work with when the transfer portal market comes in a couple months. It's going to be quicker than we know it. And Rob Sullivan and company will have to be ready for that, depending on how much say Rob Sullivan has and how much Steve Peichel and the staff will have. But we'll see that down the line. But no, I would. The Francis off the bench question is interesting. Steve Peichel was asked that a couple times today, and he seemed almost befuddled by the question, which I understand. Drake Francis is playing great off the bench, and he wasn't great as a starter. I say keep the guy coming off the bench. It's working, clearly. I understand the sentiment of maybe wanting Rutgers to start off better. Rutgers did not score a basket in the first 4 minutes until he checked in, and then they did not score a basket from another player not named Tariq Francis for the first 13 minutes. So I understand the desire to get him on the court earlier and give him a chance to get Rutgers started off well, but I just don't think that's the you do that and the switch is flipped. I think there are a lot bigger issues on this team to figure out. So I kind of empathize with Steve's point there. Mark Greenberg says he loves my analysis. Thank you very much. I'm not sure how many people agree with that, but I appreciate you expressing that. He says I always do a great job stating the reality of the program. I know he knows I hate hearing it, but if we don't make the tournament next season, will Pike be fired? Well, I think we're all in agreement. We all understand Steve Peichel is coming back next season, right? I'm glad we're beyond that point where people are asking that question. There's no question he's coming back next season. If he doesn't make the tournament, will he be fired? I don't know. It depends if the roster is constructed better or not, if they're on the bubble in March and it's one of the situations like in the 22-23 season where they miss it by a hair or they miss it by, if it's another replica of this year. If it's another replica of this year and Rutgers fighting not to finish last in the Big 12, see how you don't, right? Because the entire theory here is that he's going to have more money than he's ever had to work with, and it'll be a sense of a trial run where you want to see if he's able to justify, sticking around and he can navigate the current reality. I think there's a lot of ifs there. I think, I don't want to throw a number out there. I would be purely guessing. I think there would be a chance that happens. I don't know if it's a stone cold lock. I don't know. I would say it's a real possibility, but I think we're talking hypotheticals and we're about 14 months from that question really being asked. At some point we'll talk to Kelly Zinn on the record about her thoughts on Steve Peichel's position, but I would think it's very clear that he's coming back next year. And I think that, you also have to keep in mind he would be owed $16 million after the end of next year, right? So it's not like it's even that much more tenable than this year, but I do think that it's $4 million less, and you have a real reason in the sense that you give him more money, and if you can't do anything with that money, then you figure it's best to pull the plug then than it is to kind of give it another year because, if you can't do anything with the money one year, you're kind of probably doomed to not do anything with the money the following year. But we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. I appreciate the question, but I think we'll have a lot of time to talk about that. Dr. Josh Fink says, is it time to take a friendly wager on who comes back next year, player-wise? Pico and Shannon are not going anywhere unless anybody has expendable $50 million. I agree, and I think most of the people with money around Rutgers like these coaches, are more likely to pay money to keep them to get rid of them. That's kind of the sense I get. But we can. I mean, I don't know. I think it's too early, and I think there's too many questions, too many variables. Like which guys want playing time, which guys are going to want a lot more money than Rutgers is going to be able to, what their roles are going to be, what other players is Rutgers going to be able to do, like what the ultimate financial capabilities of Rutgers are going to be. If you're asking me my opinion, which players I want back, and again, this is right now, Friday, January 23rd, after Rutgers just lost to Indiana, and they're 2-7 in the Big Ten. Things could change in the next month if a guy has a really big leap. But right now, I would certainly take back Tariq Francis as a guy off the bench, like a spark plug scoring guy. So, but you have to be like, my caveats are, you have to be your 7th or 8th guy, and you would have to take roughly the same amount of money he's making now, if not a little bit more. You can give him a little bit of a bump because he's played really well this year, but for the responsibility that I envision that Rutgers will need him in for Rutgers to be a better team next year, I think you have to pay him roughly the same. Because frankly, I'm not sure how much more money he would get on the open market too. So that would be an interesting leverage play there. I'd certainly take him back. I like what I see from King Powers. I'm not sure how much he's a Steve Pikiell player. Like he's much more offensive oriented than defensive. But I think I like the aggressiveness I see from him offensively. I think he has the best offensive skill set of the freshman class. So I could see him coming back. I think he would be an asset. And then who am I missing in the freshman? Lino Mark and Chris Woolley. I think one of those two. I don't know if you bring both of them back. I don't know if they both want to be back. Not necessarily because they play the same roles, but I think just if you're bringing all these guys back, you're bringing back the same team, right? So I think one of those two. I have no real preference. Maybe Woolley because I think he has a higher ceiling if he's developed, but I'm not sure he's on a timeline where that development will start to show enough next year. But obviously the coaching staff is in the room and they'll have a better sense of that than I do. But I guess one of those two, I guess right now I'm leaning Lino Mark, but I'm not sure either of them make a major dent in how next season goes. Who else am I missing? Let me pull up the roster so I'm not. I think the two Europeans are probably guys you let go. Clearly just I didn't play this battle out. I almost feel bad for him playing 3 minutes every game and just not keeping up defensively and too timid offensively to do much. I just think he's clearly not at this level. And then Harun Zerno's too inconsistent and hasn't shown enough in big spots offensively. And I just think those two guys are, maybe they're more mid-major players. Maybe they're low-major players. I just don't think they're Big Ten players. And they're playing lower roles, right? So it's not like they're being asked to be star players. I just don't think they're good enough for this level. JaMychal Davis will be a senior. I think the value of him coming back is very low. Again, if he's your 11th, 12th guy, maybe he's there as a veteran presence, but I just don't think that. I think if he comes back and plays a big role, I don't think Rutgers would be in position. By fall, I think obviously you have to say goodbye to him. Javonte Ware has shown not enough to want to be returned, unless he's a deep roster guy that you want to develop, like you did this year. Dorian Jones, I'm assuming he's coming back. Rutgers is putting resources into getting him eligible again and ready to play next year. He's redshirting this year, so I don't see why not bring him back. And I can't imagine he would ask for that much money. Emmanuel Bole runs out of eligibility. Bryce Dortch, again, a guy that maybe a 10th guy, but probably not. I just don't think he's good enough for this level. And then Dylan Grant, if he takes, I don't know how much he's making. I don't know if you want to say a pay cut or roughly what he's making now, but he's got to be another 8th, 9th guy in the rotation. He can't be a starter. He just doesn't show enough this year. I know he's dealt with the flu, and some of that has held him back, but even early in the year against low major teams, I just haven't seen enough to think he's a guy who can play a major role on a successful Big Ten team. Again, back into the rotation guy if he wants to be that. But I think for him, he'll want to go to a lower level, a la Antoine Woolfolk, who did not have much of a role here, and now he's playing a major role in starting on one of the best teams in the country, one of the only undefeated teams left in the country in Miami of Ohio. So I could see that. But again, way too early. This is all speculation for fun of a live show. I know that's what people like to hear and kind of speculate on that because there's really not much to talk about on the court. Mark Greenberg says Shiano's not the problem. The basketball program under Pikiell is way worse. Shiano got us to the postseason. I just think making a bowl game is not exactly something that puts you over the top. I think in recent years, I would agree with you, right? Steve Pikiell has reached higher highs than than Greg Schiano, but he hasn't done them in 5 years, and this program is regressing, and they missed out on the tournament with two top 5 NBA players, so NBA draft picks. So I would say certainly the stock is on Pikel is cratering, and Schiano is probably at best leveling off. So, but let's not turn this into a Schiano Pikel thing. We have plenty of time to do that in the offseason. In the preseason, coach said that he was glad they got back to a defensive team. He also said that he had 2 players that were capable of being Caleb McConnell. Why was he so wrong? Steve Pikel is not the only coach to ever pump up his team preseason. I will say he's more guilty than most coaches, and he does go a little too far off. I should say too far in hyperbole. I mean, he's done that many times. So I think longtime Rutgers fans shouldn't be surprised that he goes a little bit too far. I think that, at times they were, they showed shades of the team they've been under Steve Pikel in the past, but I agree with the sentiment. They haven't been quite there. They haven't been good enough defensively, certainly, to make up for their offensive issues. But I think that's just a case of Pikel exaggerating the preseason, like most coaches do, and a big lesson in don't take everything coaches say with a grain of salt, especially in the preseason. Because what else are they going to say? Maybe they'll tell you guys off the record or on the side what they really feel. I think some coaches just tell you the same thing no matter what. But to expect a coach to be more honest preseason is probably a bit ambitious. Kevin Feinjones said if he can auction his One Direction card, I will happily take your One Piece card if you got one for $50. That's my maximum offer. Take it or leave it. I'll even pick it up in Indiana if you want. Not to dox you, Kevin. I'm sorry. Mark Greenberg says, how come Pikel never fires his coaches? Why is his offense just the same one-on-one street ball? Schiano makes changes to his staff every year. Steve Pikel not changing his coaching staff is a major issue, no doubt. He's never fired a coach from what I can remember, and the coaches have left. Ben Asher's in Utah State. Jay Young left to be a head coach, and he's back. Brandon Knight's been here the whole time. TJ Thompson's been here for almost the whole time. And Carl Hobbs left on his own accord. He wasn't fired. And Marlon Williamson's been here for 3 years, and I'm not quite sure, why. They have 1-year extensions, these guys, and you'd think that at some point you'd want to make a change. You would think after last year's debacle you'd want to make a change. Brandon Knight is kind of untouchable because his contract is enormous. Pat Hobbs kind of tethered him to Steve Pikel with just a huge contract, which came after the Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper win, so I understand that to an extent, but he's probably the least likely. But I agree that it's not a great sign that he hasn't fired the coaches, and I think that's why there's some stagnation on the court and some cratering on the court is because there hasn't been a change of ideas, an injection of new ideas, and this offense has been very simplistic and one-on-one and non-existent at times for 10 years. And because there have been no defensive changes, there have been no strategy changes on the court. Alec from on 3 says the Scalpers and the Conquerors were more aggressive at the point of attack against unknowing Rutgers fans and the Scarlet Knights at times on the perimeter. I like that. That's good analysis. You should have kept that for your own podcast, but I will gladly take it and put it on mine. Dr. Josh Finks asks if anyone else sold the cards for $300 each. Let me know what you guys did in the comments. Linda Conroy says an awful night for a true fan. Lines going in and then attacked by 4 scalpers. Probably got to my seat. That's when my jersey came out. I agree that this is good. Gets Rutgers some good publicity, but it kind of hurt the crowd in the sense of atmosphere, and I do feel bad for the average Rutgers fan that has to kind of deal with it, but it is what it is. Do you guys have anything else? That's kind of the last comment on here. I've kind of run through everything. Rutgers plays Michigan State on Tuesday. Another tough game. Another really good defensive team. Team that's going to shoot mid-range jumpers, so Rutgers will kind of meet its match there. But Michigan State has kind of owned the rack outside of the COVID year and the year after that. So it's going to be tough to beat Tom Izzo team that's gunning for another Big Ten regular season title. I think Steve Pikel understands the challenge there. And then, the issue is then right after that, you're going on a trip to Los Angeles for a few days after you just spent whatever it was, 6 days on the road at Wisconsin and Iowa. So a lot of things for this team to deal with. I just don't I think it's going to be – we predicted this would be a bumpy ride, the 7-game stretch, and it's going just about as we predicted, Pillity and I, and I don't see it reversing. Maybe against USC, maybe, but I don't give them much of a shot against Michigan State. So it's going to be up to Steve Pikiell to kind of keep his team together, fix the effort issues, the practice issues they've talked about today, and maintain things until the schedule softens up, and to see if they're able to kind of have that one last push. Because now, with this loss, they're now 2-7, and Rutgers is still 2 games ahead of Penn State for last in the Big Ten. Penn State plays Ohio State on Monday, and they're only 1 game ahead of Maryland, Oregon, and Northwestern. 1 game and a half against Northwestern and Oregon, I guess, to be fair. But if they don't get these wins at the end of the year against Maryland and Penn State and build some distance, it's not out of the question that they finish, last or second to last in the Big Ten. So whatever that's worth. To me, it's not worth much, but because they make the Big Ten tournament anyway. But that's something to watch. So, Michael Haldowski, apologies, Michael, SNIT, maybe. Will this team want to play in the NIT? I don't know. Or play in the Crown? I don't know. But to that end, you're going to have to win some games to make those tournaments. I don't think they invite last place teams, from what I remember. So, as desperate as they are for inventory, I think if Rutgers finishes last place, they won't get invited, unless a lot of teams decline it, which is certainly possible these days where teams are declining bowl games, and the Rutgers declined NIT last year, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. But I guess if that's what you're gunning for, I just don't see the value in that. Though the portal doesn't open until a month after the season, after the national championship game, so maybe you can play that tournament worry-free. You're playing with house money, and it's another chance to evaluate your team before the portal period. In that period where you're probably going to be having negotiations. So, again, that's a conversation we have down the line in a couple months. For right now, it's see what Rutgers will do against Michigan State, see if Rutgers can prevent another blowout, and see if Rutgers can figure something out offensively, which I doubt, or the effort thing defensively, which I can see that being corrected to a certain extent. I don't know about against Michigan State, but I think at some point, maybe in a more winnable game. But it'll be a tough challenge for Steve Pikiell to kind of rally the troops. But we'll see. He said tomorrow will be the longest practice and one of the hardest practices they'll do this season. I think he's clearly PO'd about it. We'll see if that does anything. But unless you guys have anything last second, I appreciate you guys tuning in on Friday night and participating. Stay safe from the snowstorm all. Be well. Make sure you guys have all your supplies needed. And until then, I don't know if we're recording Monday. I know I promised that last week without knowing Politi was on vacation, so I apologize for that. I think we'll record Monday, if only just to talk about the fact that Rutgers still hasn't hired a defensive coordinator. But if we don't talk Monday for whatever reason, we will talk Tuesday after the Michigan State game. Until then, be safe. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like the video, join our Discord, follow us on Twitter, all that good stuff. We'll talk to you all soon. Later.